The beautiful part about the offseason is that we're going to spend a whole lot of energy on mock drafts without knowing what the team's going to look like when the draft comes along. Because we've got free agency and we've got trades before that. And what can the Texans do during free agency, which includes potential trades like we saw with Joe Mixon a couple of years ago, to set themselves up for the draft. And I've always felt, as I think most teams do, you want to enter the draft with as many holes filled as possible on your roster so you don't feel desperate or that you have to go after and get somebody. So I'm going to lay out the tiers of free agency, what I'd really love them to hit, and I think a lot of you have the exact same top two items that I do, and then the second and the third tiers for where we'd like to fill in some holes so you can get into the draft and be as much about best player available as possible. But if we start with the offense, look, offensive line and running back. This is not going to be headline-grabbing news or in stark defiance to any of you. There's a position group that's in my tier 2 that I'll get to that I know some of you think should be tier 1. I might disagree slightly. But O-line, let's just look at what we have right now. The green are the free agents. But if you start at left tackle, Ariante Aristide, they've got Titus Howard here at left guard. Jake Andrews, Ed Ingram, they've got Ed Ingram. Oh, that's right. Ed Ingram's a free agent. And then Trent Brown, also a free agent. So you've got right there with that configuration, at least two guys are free agents, Ed Ingram and Trent Brown. Where Titus Howard plays at left guard or right tackle depends on what they pick up in free agency and what they get in the draft. I would like to see them retain Ed Ingram at a reasonable price. I think Ed Ingram as a run blocker and generally as a pass protector has been really good this year. There's times where he gets beat quickly in pass protection that I'm not a huge fan of. But if you don't retain Ed Ingram, and you can't, maybe because of the price, whatever it might be, then all of a sudden you've got 3 interior line spots that need to be filled. Maybe Titus Howard fills one of those, but then you've still got Trent Brown at right tackle. I would like to see at least 2 acquisitions before the draft. Veteran players that you can trust are either upgrades or competent pros with a track record, and then you can still draft offensive linemen after that. And then running back, of course, look, Woody Marks, I love. I think Woody Marks can play an even heavier role next year, but Woody Marks also got hurt pretty much every single game that he was in this year, and it's obvious you need somebody more than just in aging Nick Chubb, who I think did a great job for the condition he's in. The guys I don't want to sleep on are, of course, Jawar Jordan. They got him at 4th. And then Dare Bungawale, who's also a free agent, Nick Chubb, free agent. British Brooks, very intriguing. But between British Brooks, Dare, if he gets re-signed, Jawar Jordan, and then, of course, Joe Mixon. This is how ridiculous it is. I mentioned Joe Mixon as like the 5th or 6th guy amongst the running backs. I like the upside of those other guys and Brooks and Jawar Jordan. I have no idea what to think of Joe Mixon other than that if they don't get really incredible reports about Joe Mixon right now, you got to enter the offseason just figuring that he's not going to be available, and you got to go out and get somebody to pair alongside of Woody Marks. My goodness. So there's that. And that's my tier 1, because this is the year that the Texans genuinely have to decide, okay, who are we going to be? We've got C.J. Stroud for at least one more year. He doesn't have the greatest pass protection in front of him. I know some of the numbers make it look better than it is, but it has not been great. The running game was one of the worst run games in the league. Part of that was Woody Marks learning how to be a running back and wasn't your lead guy until the second half of the season. But obviously a lot of that is in the run game as well. People have asked me about Tyler Linderbaum, the Ravens center, and whether I'd like him. Because they point out that he's not necessarily great in pass protection. That is where I get a little bit nervous about paying top dollar for a center who's an awesome run blocker, very versatile, can pull, can do all these other things. He's not awesome in pass protection, but this Texans team has said they want to be tough and physical. They want to be able to run the football. Tyler Linderbaum is exactly the kind of guy that can help you do that. And if you're able to do all those things, then you set up the play action very effectively, all the things that the Ravens have been able to do. The other thing about him, not to get off on too much of a side note, is that he is also pass protecting for Lamar Jackson, who holds onto the ball longer than just about anybody in the league. It works for him, obviously. It's not a criticism. That's just the type of player he is. So Do they want to get serious about it? That's why on tier 2, I actually bring my defensive tackles into the mix because I see a lot of people stressing that they need defensive tackles. Just look at this if we look at the defensive tackles, the guys who are free agents, Sheldon Rankins, Tim Settle. Let's see if we go. We've also got, Danico Autry, who can play inside, but mostly on passing downs. And then Foley Fatukasi, of course. Oh, not to mention Naquan Jones. There were so many guys that played this year. So all of those guys were signed to either 1 or 2 year deals at relatively reasonable rates. And I think that they can retain at least 1 or 2 of those guys while also taking advantage of the fact that Tommy Togiai has really turned into one of the best run-stuffing defensive tackles in the league. They're going to rotate those guys. If they're in a position where they can take a defensive tackle because they've signed free agent offensive linemen and a running back in free agency, I am all for it. I'd love it. But 4 of those guys are going to play on any given Sunday because, as Matt Burke says, he wants them throwing fastballs all the time. You want to rotate those guys in. You guys been watching Olympic hockey this weekend? Maybe you're not familiar with hockey. The reason they're changing lines all the time is because guys play their asses off for 45 to 90 seconds, and then you have to switch guys out. They treat the defensive line kind of like a hockey line. And I know hockey fans are going to be yelling at me about how just painfully simple that explanation was. If you're not from Houston, you don't understand how people in Houston don't necessarily understand hockey, but they understand Tommy Togiai. They understand that J.J. Watt was into hockey. At defensive end, a couple drafts have had the Texans take edge rushers. The one argument where I would agree with that is, A, they take care of business on the offensive line. But then, B, you look at, all right, Derek Barnett has been part of some big moments for you. Danico Autry didn't live up to his contract, but he's done some really good things for you. And Danielle Hunters, he's only under contract at any given time for the 1 year that I think he's going to keep signing 1 year extensions for like the next 3 or 4 years. But he is getting along in the tooth. And if you bring in a good young edge rusher, probably maybe in the second round, if Nick even goes in the first round at 28, we know it's very likely that he doesn't. Defensive tackle is first amongst my second tier. The other part of the second tier would be the defensive backfield. And it's just because we have seen what happens when one of the starters goes out. We saw what happened when Kamari Lassiter went out for 2 series against the Chargers. They don't have ideal depth in the secondary, which is frustrating because they've got one of the best secondaries in the league, obviously. The other part of it, too, and I know a lot of people will bring this up, is that they don't necessarily have a safety to start opposite of Kalen Bullock. Jalen Reed is where he comes in. I think they like Jalen Reed. I think that I'd still prefer there to be either a re-signing of MJ Stewart or somebody else, or Miles Bryant that can come back and at least provide a reliable veteran there, but perhaps upgrading above and beyond that. It's not going to be a name brand guy. And it's not going to be Minkah Fitzpatrick for multiple reasons. Minkah, I think, is making too much money for who he is as a player right now. And you're not allowed to have 5. You're not allowed to have 5 all-pro caliber defensive backs. You're allowed to, but you don't go aggressively. When you've got a top 3 defense in the league, you don't go out and spend money aggressively to be sure that you've got 5 all-pro caliber defensive backs. They've already got 4 guys who are all-pro capable. Maybe not all of them are all-pro caliber yet, but they're all-pro capable. You just got to find either Jalen Reed or somebody else to fill in there, and then obviously depth at outside cornerback as well. And that's where, in free agency or perhaps in the draft, that's on that tier there. The third tier, I would go with linebackers, and I know a lot of us really liked EJ Speed. The Texans are in nickel all the time, so we didn't get to see EJ Speed as much as I'd like. But Christian Harris is a free agent, and he's just not the same guy he used to be before he had that mysterious calf injury. EJ Speed, I'm curious about. I think they'd love to bring him back. He was here on a 1-year deal. I don't want to say, hey, you can go out and find other EJ Speeds, because he's a very unique player who I don't think necessarily fits into all the right shoe boxes when it comes to free agent linebackers. His old running mate, Zaire Franklin, is a free agent as well. And what am I missing? The O-line and running back for the first tier, DTs and depth at the secondary for second tier. Tight end, I was a little torn on. I didn't know whether to make that third tier or second tier. Second tier felt a little bit like, man, we could always use better tight ends, but I'm wondering if maybe they come in the draft, because part of it is that they're going to, I think, be banking on two things. One, the development of Brevin Jordan, and two, that maybe this is the year the development of Cade Stover. And then three, maybe this is the year that Brevin Jordan finally stays healthy. They love him. Like Harrison Bryant's listed above Brevin Jordan, but he's a free agent as well. Braxton Berrios, I'm sorry for your loss of his girlfriend. Supposedly Tom Brady's dating her. Who knows? And Christian Kirk, look, this is going to be all about Jalen Noel and how Jalen Noel does this here. Oh, a little tidbit for you. Here's Steve Smith, who absolutely loves Jaden Higgins, on Higgins and how much he developed throughout the season. I liked this.
And I said, beginning of the season, he was very robotic. He was just running his routes. Oh, they said run this. And then as he started to get more comfortable. He started to get back to what he was in college, where he started to put his style and his flavor on the route that he was running. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, things start opening up. Sure hands. Some people would put him in the same category. I don't know if I would yet, but he damn sure has those traits of sure hands like a Larry Fitzgerald.
Oh.
Right?
You
just know when you're throwing the football.
Larry Fitzgerald. Simple as that. It's just going to be Larry Fitzgerald. I'm excited about Jaden Higgins. Everything that Steve Smith also said in this video, talking about how he's a bigger guy, but he's able to kind of sit down in his routes and lower his pads and do a lot of things that, frankly, Nico Collins does. And Nico Collins, it was something that he worked into. And that excites me. Keenan Allen is a free agent, and I've seen people mention Keenan Allen. The only thing I worry about with Keenan Allen is that that's a guy that Jaden Higgins said that he emulated and liked to watch a lot of. I think they had to iron out a little bit of the wannabe Keenan Allen in Jaden Higgins earlier in the year, because Keenan Allen does his own thing, kind of an unorthodox route runner, where with Jaden, I think part of it was, all right, you got to learn to run the vanilla routes first so the timing's right, so we know exactly where you're going to be when you need to be there. And then, you bring the Keenan Allen stuff along a little later as you get older. But Keenan Allen, we interviewed him at the Super Bowl, and Sean mentioned the Texans defense, and Keenan's eyes just kind of lit up like, yeah, those guys. He's had some good games against the Texans, obviously. All right, one thing. I would love for them to bring Joe Mixon back, that grumpy guy. This is the problem. We don't know if he's capable of playing football. So that's really, if Joe Mixon comes back and he's 100% healthy, then we don't have any tier 1 issues at running back. So maybe I would add Joe Mixon to that tier 1, that, hey, all right, look, it's either trade, free agency, or Joe Mixon, please be healthy. Jason, I think that you had reached out to me on Twitter about the strong safety, or the safety opposite Kalen Bullock, being way thinner, resolving turnstile at the position that cost us 2 games last year. I think if you were the one that said it on Twitter, you accused us of not talking about it at all on the radio. I've actually talked about it a good amount. Like there were 6 different guys that occupied that role at any given time that year. If we go all the way back to Jimmy Ward, and then obviously C.J. Gardner-Johnson, and then various other guys along the way. Yes, they do need somebody better, or at the very least somebody who's out there all the time. Injuries were part of the problem. I'm just saying you don't need a name brand all-pro guy right there. You already have one of the best secondaries in the league. They just need consistency, so it's not a revolving door. So there we have it. Let me know in the comments where I messed up the tiers, what you think tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 should be. And as always, please like, subscribe, and I apologize for my voice. Unprofessional.